Well, good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock on Monday, March 1st. We'd like to call to order the Administration Committee meeting. Can we do roll call, please?
Yep. Supervisor Long.
Present.
Supervisor Cook.
Present.
Supervisor Ard.
Present.
Supervisor Peterson.
Here.
Supervisor Peavy.
Here.
We have a quorum.
And I want to thank everyone for their flexibility in rescheduling this meeting. We did have some scheduling conflicts in February, partly due to myself. But I appreciate your flexibility and ability to get together prior to the board meeting tomorrow. As far as approval of minutes, I don't believe that we reviewed the minutes from January meeting, but I didn't see any included in the.
Yeah, we'll catch those at the regular meeting.
Okay.
At the special meeting, it doesn't default in.
Okay.
But we'll get them on the regular meeting.
All right, great. Okay, I'll ask for public comment, but it doesn't appear that we have anyone here that wants to talk to us. So we'll move on to our business items. The financial report, Ken?
Thank you, Chairman Long. Let's see. In the financial report, we're looking at the amounts just through the month of January. So really, it's too early to pick up any trends on that yet. What I would refer you back to probably is the fiscal year 20 actual final, because this has most of the adjusting journal entries that we're going to make in that now. So if you look at those columns and do any type of comparison, that's probably a really good comparison at this point in year. And then any audit adjustments we won't have until summer, and those columns will be adjusted at that point. But if you do go through and look at all of the different departments and the bottom lines, we want to make sure we see in black and don't see any totals in red. That would show that the department finished the year within the black. So those first two columns are showing your fiscal year 19 and your fiscal year 20 ending numbers in fiscal year 20 before audit adjustments. So are there any questions on what you see in the financial statements?
Just a quick clarification. This is on page 14 for IT. There was a line 53-130 managed prints costs. Doesn't look like there was much budgeted there, but there was a cost of close to $74,000.
Yep, I can explain that. So that managed print IT cost, that's a pretty easy one, John. It's billed back to the other departments. So you have a big expense right away that hits there, and then they split that out to the other departments, which will bring it back down, then it'll offset it. So it's a temporary placeholder for that first invoice that got paid. No other questions? All righty. At the end there, sales tax, I think we're looking good for the year. The vehicle registration fee is right on target with budget. That's that top part. And then we got one more month yet to receive on sales tax, but we're already ahead of budget. Like we said, that this year has been the highest year we've ever seen in sales tax growth. All right.
Any other questions for Ken on the finances? Supervisor Peavy.
I question on the capital improvements, and just where does the sale of the old highway shop show up in that?
Yep. Yeah. So right up here, property asset sales.
Okay.
Prior year actuals of 1.75 million. It's within that number.
Okay.
So it came back into the capital improvement fund.
Right, I knew that, I just didn't.
Yep.
So it's buried in that property asset sales?
It is, yeah.
It'd be the major part of it, of course, but.
It's the major part of it. Really, the other thing is squad cars. We get, 50 to 75,000 a year on squad car sales, and then a few other miscellaneous sales, a couple vehicles or any type of office furniture or something Jim's liquidating.
Other questions? Don't want to forget about you, Scotty, so let me know if you wave me down if you got questions.
I'll do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, let's move on to our business items, or I'm sorry, the second business item, the consideration position reclassification, Circuit Court Finance Administration and Human Resources.
Yeah, so this is a little bit intricate. These next two items are tied together. Sort of the chicken and the egg for part of it, especially the finance position one. But I'll try to explain what we're doing here. The first part, the circuit court, is a straight up reclassification or a regrade. So we've looked at a position that's on our grade scale, compared it with internal comparables, external comparables, and really determined that it was graded below where it should. So the HR director and then I are recommending the regrade of this treatment court coordinator position from grade 63 to a grade 65. And this is what the step change would look like for that employee that holds that position. That's really standalone from everything else that's happening, but it's a regrade that's the jurisdiction of the administration committee. The next item on here is moving the ERP analyst from the finance department to the IT department. We've actually been doing this over the last 5 months on a trial basis. It seems to be working out well. There's actually no approval necessary on this, other than I think it's a small piece of the bigger picture of where we're moving and shifting some of the jobs and responsibilities. So I put it in there just as a reference for you to see that it's moving. Within the finance department then, so again, looking at the big picture of what's happening here. So we took a look at all of the FTEs that we have available to us after the county administrator left and I was promoted into that position, and looked at where the need was. And so the needs that the previous county administrator have are a little bit different than the needs that I have. So we've been able to reorganize some of the positions. So the assistant county administrator was serving as the finance director. 1/4 of the assistant county administrator was charged to the finance department to oversee the management of that department. When I took over as the interim county administrator, I assigned all those duties, that 1/4 of duties, to the assistant finance director, and she was serving as the interim finance director. So the county does need to have a finance director, and because of part of the bigger picture, I'm not replacing the assistant county administrator, which served as the finance. We need to account for that somewhere. So my recommendation is to eliminate the assistant finance director position, recreate the finance director position, which is actually in the budget amendment part, and then a reclassification, which is the approval of the administration committee, to reclassify the assistant finance director to that finance director. Now this is, in the truest sense, a reclassification, because a reclassification versus the regrade. The regrade, we looked at an employee and what their market comparables were and updated that. A reclassification is when someone's job duties have changed. And so this employee's job duties have changed because we added those additional job duties that I was doing as the finance director to that employee who was able to absorb those duties. And so that's a reclassification. But we have to create the position first, which is the next agenda item. That's where it gets a little bit complicated, I guess. So that's the finance department. So you can see a couple of things that are happening that affects the finance department. When we get to administration then, we had 3.25 FTEs within administration. The assistant county administrator position was really broken into probably 3 or 4 sections. So the assistant county administrator served a quarter time as the finance director. They served half-time split between workers' compensation and liability insurance and other insurances, and then the rest was policy administration under the county administrator. So we're going to divide that up by having finance take over the quarter time for the finance director without adding any FTEs. We're going to move the workers' compensation from administration to HR, and we're going to move the quarter FTE then with that. And then we're going to reuse the executive administrative assistant and create a full-time administrative assistant. So that's going to supplement the other parts then that were done by the county administrator and by the executive administrative assistant to create the new 3.0 FTEs within that department and a reorganization of how that work is done within that department. So does that part make sense there? That's probably, all right. And then finally, the HR department, what we're doing with that is 3/4 of the executive administrative assistant were in the HR department. So that position was used as a backup for some of the duties that the other staff are doing, specifically the HR benefit analysts and a little bit of what the HR advisors do. But it was used as a backup for that and administrative task. So we're going to move into HR, the workers' compensation, which will probably be assigned, I would guess, to the assistant HR director, although that's up to the HR director exactly where that gets assigned. The backup roles that the executive administrative assistant were doing are going to be reassigned then to the assistant HR director so that there's an overlap of responsibilities there, and we always have a backup for that. And then some of the very minor administrative tasks that were done by the administrative assistant will still be done by the full-time administrative assistant that's in admin. We'll still use a little bit of that, but it's a smaller amount now that I'm not going to worry about the cost sharing on that. So that's how we're looking at realigning the duties within the HR department. Now we have questions.
Questions? Supervisor Peterson?
The first items I don't have any issue with at all, but I must confess, and I apologize, I was made aware of some things at a late date that I have some real concerns about the human resources realignment. Something was brought to my attention is that our former administrator has a county that has, and I haven't been able to verify this, 1,200 employees and has 4 human resource folks. And I guess I'm not comfortable with, I've had, and I normally don't like to get into county business administrative, but I've had enough feedback from folks that about the availability of people in HR, and just the term HR, in my opinion, and this is only my opinion, should be here in the building as much or more than maybe Cindy's office or the treasurer, and they're not available. I could be wrong, but all that said, I don't think that I'm ready at this time to support that one area. I'll leave it at that and go from there. I'm sorry.
I'll add to that. I guess I have some concerns about the addition of an assistant HR director, and I guess to support that, I feel a lot more comfortable getting a lot more information to substantiate the need for that, because it's a fairly high-level graded position, and I certainly don't have enough information within the packet to for it to really justify. So that was my main concern with the reorganization. The vast majority of it makes perfect sense, but I'm just a little uncomfortable with that piece. Other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Ard.
thank you. As has already been pointed out, there has been a great deal of feedback from persons within the county. I would like to see an employee survey as to staff's feelings on the HR department, their accessibility, their face-to-face experiences with human resources. We're looking at a significant change within this department, and I feel that as human resources is our front line for staff personnel, that we should have their input regarding how our human resources department is functioning. I think there is more information that can be provided regarding this shift within this department, and I'd like to see more information on it before making a decision.
Supervisor Peavy?
Come on. Yeah, I'd like to follow up with, the comment. I was just, again, bombarded with concerns at the last minute on this and on human resources changes. So I would like more information. I think, and I don't know if we can postpone that part of the whole reorganization to a later date, but again, I'm just looking for more information. I really don't have an opinion at this time, but more information would be helpful.
I also had a couple other concerns about things that we haven't discussed yet, but it's all kind of wrapped into the resolution. So do you want to go through that first and then, because it's all kind of a package here.
Yeah, if you're talking the budget amendment piece then, so there's two other positions on there, which we can talk about because they're independent of this in total. So when we look at this reorganization, we can definitely postpone action on this line, the Assistant HR Director. We can make the other changes, and then we can come back with additional information and justify the addition of that position at a later time. That's certainly possible.
Supervisor Peterson?
Apparently, there was a person that's relatively, not very new, but relatively new, not a long tenure, being moved into a position at 2 pay grade increases into a position that would normally be open for bidding. I'm using the wrong term here,
Yep.
but competition. But I guess I'm uncomfortable with that not being advertised first and rather than being filled in a temporary fashion. I don't understand the maybe the need for that immediately either.
Yep. Yeah, I can explain that one. So that is this HR benefit analyst position. So that position does recruitments. So the person, HR benefit, specialist, sorry. I am one right below that. All right, so HR specialist. So that position does recruitments. And so I had explained before that the executive administrative assistant does backup for some of these other roles. So what we did was we have, on an interim basis, moved that employee to an HR specialist. So no different than when we moved the assistant county administrator to county administrator on an interim. They applied for the position and were able to get that. It would be the same scenario here. That employee would still need to apply for the position to take it on a permanent basis. They've only assumed it on an interim basis. And they are paid at the lowest rate within that grade for doing those job responsibilities.
I guess I'd also be concerned with how much time this person has in the past spent here as opposed to working off-site. There's some questions there, so that's my point in maybe delaying as much of this as we can.
Yep. So the interim appointment isn't in this at all. The interim appointment is a temporary administrative function that we've done. I think what you do have control over to take action on today is that assistant HR director, which is in the budget amendment. You can eliminate that line, and we can take that up at a later date with additional justification.
Would that, it seems like that would be, if that's a piece of the pie, so to speak, that's going to be related to other responsibilities within this structure. So
Yep.
wouldn't it make maybe more sense just to hold off on these changes until we get a little better idea of who's doing what and what the responsibilities are and whether or not that particular position is needed or not?
Yeah, well, I think what we would reconsider is the Workers' Compensation Administration. We'd probably leave that at administration right now until that position was added. And then this position, the other main thing they were doing was backup with the other positions. And so we'd be placing that part on hold also. So some of these positions wouldn't have necessarily a backup within the department. But I believe the rest of it can be done. And really, out of this reorganization, there's really two things that I'm asking for out of it. So I've explained a lot, but really the only two pieces that we truly need approval for is the reclassification on the assistant finance director and the reclassification, or the regrade, I mean, on the treatment court coordinator. So this piece, those are the two pieces that I need on this. And then when we get to the budget amendment, I'll explain the pieces that we need approval for on that. These two pieces do not move forward to the county board, other than the finance director is approved by the county board as an appointment. The reclassification part actually doesn't go forward, but that third piece of that finance director puzzle is the appointment by the county board, or approval by the county board of the appointment.
Okay, you lost me on that.
right.
Can you explain what goes forward and what doesn't?
Yeah, all right. So think of two things that are happening with this approval. And before we take any action on that, we'll jump down and we'll go over the budget amendment so that we can understand fully that, and then we can come back and take action on them independently. But the only two things that we really want action on are the treatment court coordinator regrade and the finance director reclassification. The rest of it is informational and really more background for the budget amendment than this piece. It's just that they're all intertwined.
And the treatment court piece, I have no problem with at all. On the reclassification, the finance director, my only main concern, and I don't mean to infer at all that it isn't deserved, but the dollar amount is pretty significant in the change in the grade. I mean, it's almost a 20% increase, and I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I know a number of other supervisors would have an issue with that.
So the grade is established by the job duties and responsibilities. The lowest step on that is step 2. We've eliminated step 1 off of the grade system 2 years ago. So the lowest step is step 2, which she's been operating at under the past 6 months. She's been at step 2, and she would have been entitled to a step increase on January 1. And so that's how come I had picked step 3 as the starting point. That's how I came to that decision or recommendation.
Did anyone else have any similar concerns, or
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead? Yeah.
the proposed grade 74, excuse me, the proposed grade 74 step 3 for the reclassification of the finance director would be in line with similar positions throughout the state of Wisconsin. This is not for that particular position, this would not be a significant increase in comparable counties. They'd be pretty much on point.
Supervisor Peterson?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, but part of that obviously is that she has been previously assistant, and she's been working as a full-time now, and she would be or the head of it. So I personally feel that's justified.
Yeah, the other thing I can throw out there on that is that she's doing a really good job, and I don't like to admit this very often, but she's probably actually even a better accountant than I am, so. All right, so I would suggest, let's go on and review the budget amendment now. And because all the pieces are tied together, maybe after we review that, you'll feel more comfortable with what's going on here. All right, so in the budget amendment, we're doing three things. So one of them, let me see. All right, so we have a community development grant project technician. So in the community development department, and this is standalone from everything else, we're adding this technician position. So Ellen in the community development department had received a grant that starts April 1st, which is why we needed this on a special agenda to get it before the county board in March here. April 1st, the grant starts, and she wants to hire the grant project technician. It's substantially funded through the grant, and she had planned on using fund balance for the remainder of that position. So fund balance applied, $13,890. So that's the county portion of that position, and it's from fund balance applied. So that's that position. Are there any questions on the grant project technician? That was a fairly easy one, I thought. Yeah, Bill?
I think I read they sunset in 2 years, or whatever the grant.
It does, yep.
Yep.
Yep, so we do watch grant-funded positions. They don't just roll into tax levy-funded positions. If they are, I'm going to expressly spell it out for you, and we'll explain it in the budget process when we get there. Which is a good segue to the next one, then, is the epidemiologist position. So we've had an epidemiologist on staff as an LTE. So the Public Health Department has really enjoyed that position and the benefits that position has provided. And Bob Rohrt, the HHS director, has expressed interest in other things that epidemiologists could do, even beyond the pandemic, that he sees it as being beneficial for other departments within HHS. They do a lot of data analysis, which is going to be beneficial. So the epidemiologist, they're proposing to make a full-time regular position for the county. So that would provide some stability for the position. Instead of being an LTE, they would become a regular position. They do have funding to get all the way through 2021 and 9 months out of 2022. So that position then would convert to a tax levy funded position, 1/4 of it in the 2022 budget, and in the 2023 budget, it would be 100% tax levy funded. So you do have to know what the long-term direction of this position is, and that you're spending future tax levy dollars really by approving this. But it's been recommended, and I've gotten quite a bit of support from members of the HHS board for this position to become a regular position and retained by the county. So are there questions on epidemiologist?
Yeah, I guess my one question, well, a couple questions. If there wasn't necessarily a need pre-COVID, how has that changed in what we envision for post-COVID? Mm-hmm. And is there necessarily, since it's already funded through to October 2022, why would there be a rush to make this a permanent position now? Don't we have the flexibility of waiting to make sure that this seems to be an appropriate change going forward? Mm-hmm. I'd also be very curious as to what the benefits we see. You know, it's easy to say, well, there's going to be a lot of benefits, but it'd be nice to get a little more concrete information so that we know that that's actually, the right position to add in the future.
Sure. I will ask Bob Rohrt to speak to the benefits of the position. I can tell you from, for an LTE versus a regular position. So an LTE position for someone that's serving as our current epidemiologist doesn't provide a lot of job security. And so we have the chance of potentially losing that employee and then moving on elsewhere. So what we would like to do, because we actually like the employee also that's doing that position, is to do a recruitment now and see if she's the best person for the county moving forward, and then lock that employee in. So
that would be a posted position then?
it would still have to be posted and recruited as we do for positions, but we like the employee that's there, and there's a good chance that that employee would be the one that ends up being selected because we know that employee well and we know that the work they do, but we would do an open recruitment for it. And Bob, if you could speak to the benefits of that position, you know, what were we missing before, what do they provide, and what are they going to do after the pandemic? Just those things.
Sure. Thank you, County Administrator Witt. Mr. Chair, it's a good question. And I can answer that by saying that there was always a need for an epidemiologist in our public health department. By not having one, it's put us in a position, as you can probably know from this pandemic, where we've had to kind of scramble to find a temporary epidemiologist to help interpret and communicate data related to the pandemic. Beyond the pandemic, though, what epidemiologists do is analyze and interpret population-level health data. So that applies to many of our programs here at HHS. And what I mean by that is they look at things like chronic disease, addiction, mental health disorders, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity as examples of that. They analyze that data to see what populations specifically are affected by those kinds of disease, and then help us when we do program design and program development to better target populations that are showing up in the data as especially vulnerable to those kinds of illnesses. So they interpret population level health data, communicate that to the public, to the board, to the media, but they also help us with program design and better targeting our interventions to be more effective and more specific to populations that are affected by whatever the health concern is. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Have other questions or comments?
Those two positions are independent of each other. I've combined them all into the same budget amendment, just so there's one action item here for us. But again, they're independent. You can pull them off or separate them as you want. When we get to the rest of it then, so the assistant finance director one, so we're eliminating, so there isn't a finance director in the budget right now because it was done as a quarter of the assistant county administrator. So we need to create that position. We can eliminate the assistant finance director because we're reclassifying that employee anyways, and that takes care of that. That's really independent also of itself. Other than, I guess, you'd probably want to eliminate the assistant county administrator also from that, because that's where some of the job responsibilities were. The executive administrative assistant is primarily being reclassified down to an administrative assistant. That's that one FTE trade-off. So we're short, with all those changes up above, we're short one FTE, and so I was using that FTE to create the assistant HR director. So this is the one that if you need additional information, we can pull it off of this budget amendment and bring you back additional information to justify that position. But the rest of it then, I think could still move forward.
All right, thank you. So I don't have any concerns. I mean, I know that this was a separate thing about but the grant project technician and the positions here, it sounds like that's grant funded. We'll be reviewing that, you know, when the grant is up. I have a little bit concern about what I see technically as the new positions that are going to take tax levy with the epidemiologist eventually. I know it's not right now, but eventually, and then the assistant HR director. My concerns aren't necessarily with the positions or the purpose of the positions, but more so, we're going to be going into the budget planning process coming up here, and I'm sure there are a lot of departments that feel like they have positions that are valid to add, and so I'm wondering if that's a scenario where we should be, even though potentially all the positions that are requested could bring value to the county, if that's a scenario we should be weighing those against each other in the budget process versus looking at, applying tax levy right now.
On the grant ones, if we decided at a later date that should be undone, that could be done also. All that said, I guess I'm comfortable with everything. As I said before, pretty much so, I think is worthy of being brought before the full board, with or without, unanimous approval or whatever, but I'm comfortable with that. However, I guess I would make a motion at this time that we remove the assistant HR director from consideration at this time, pending review by the administration committee and some time to look that over, I guess, for lack of a better term.
I'll second.
I'll second the motion.
There we go. So let's discuss the motion. I might suggest, I really like your comment, Supervisor Cook, about the budget process and strategic planning, that maybe as a result of that, we may have a firmer idea for the epidemiologist. So I'd like to at least throw that out to the committee as to what your thoughts are on that, because that might be something else we consider holding off on until we go through that budget and strategic planning process. Any thoughts on that?
I guess maybe the simple way would be to act on mine, and then if somebody else wants to bring forward to remove the other one, that's their right, every bit of right. I guess I don't feel compelled right now to make that amendment to mine, but if somebody else would like to make that amendment, I certainly wouldn't object to that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so, and perhaps I missed it, and if I did, I apologize, but I don't know that there was a motion relative to the budget amendment 2, but Supervisor Peterson's motion could be construed as a main motion, but simply redacting line 48 from the proposed budget amendment. Does that make sense?
That was my understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Supervisor Peavy.
To clarify then, we're skipping the reclassification part of this and moving right on to the budget amendment? Okay. Thank you.
Yes, we're going to take up item 3, and then we'll come back to item 2.
Discussion on the motion that's on the floor then, as far as removing line 48 and considering the assistant HR director at a future time. Any further discussion on that? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Right. So that was approval of item number 3 with the removal of that line 48. And so the budget amendment then moves forward to the county board, unless there's any additional amendments to that. If not, I'll go back to item 3 then, or 2, I mean.
Actually, I would like to make a motion to temporarily take out the epidemiologist position until we've gone through the budget and process and strategic planning process.
I'll second that motion.
You have a second. Discussion. And my thoughts on that basically are not that I'm opposed to it, and I want to make that clear, but I think it makes sense to go through the budgeting and the strategic planning process, because I know there's a lot of other competing needs within the county, and to make sure that we're allocating our resources appropriately across all departments in the county.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Supervisor Ard.
with regard to the epidemiologist, had we had an epidemiologist in position years ago, we may not be dealing with the AODA and mental health crises that we are currently facing. These numbers have only risen during COVID. Having someone who can analyze those numbers, give correct and appropriate projections within the county to formulate programs to address the great need that St. Croix County currently has, whatever amount of money is needed for that position should be dealt with immediately. Going forward without having that kind of data analysis is foolhardy. I work in this every day, and I'm telling you, the numbers are increasing. The need is greater than anyone is even aware. Not considering funding an epidemiologist going forward is going to create a greater cost for the county by law enforcement, in hospitalizations, in property damages, and believe me, in homelessness. Epidemiologists are not just about disease. Having that ability to project and to create programming which is appropriate and targeted in this county should be our top priority.
Thank you, Supervisor Ard. I want to make it clear, I don't disagree with you at all. My guess is it's certainly going to be appropriate to have that position on staff. My only thought was, since this position is already funded through October of 2022, that we have time to balance our resources and make sure that it fits within the overall strategic plan and budget. Supervisor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully agree with the value of the epidemiologist on staff. I think it would have been valuable for us to have one before. I definitely agree that it's a valuable position, but I also know that we have a budget process coming up, and since the position is funded this year, I don't see that we're going to be losing that position right now. This is basically a nod to the process and an equitable opportunity for all departments throughout the county to make their case to the county board as far as value. But I fully agree with Supervisor Ard about the value and the importance of the position.
Other comments, discussion? I see some puzzled faces. I know this
I
is
guess
kind of
maybe I'd just like to have the administrator have an opportunity to weigh in on this discussion, if I could.
Yeah, the benefit of the position, which nobody's disagreeing with, allows us to work smarter. That's what I had heard Bob saying. That's how I analyzed it, was we can work smarter with the use of the epidemiologist. So everyone likes that. The only other piece that I had brought forward was by changing the position from an LTE to creating a regular position for it, it helps us potentially retain the employee that we've really gotten to know and like. So that's the benefit of making the change now rather than making the change at the end of the grant cycle.
Okay, that's a tough one. Any other discussion? Supervisor Peavy.
Just for clarification, so your motion is to eliminate line 40. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay, well, go ahead, Supervisor Peters.
Just so my position's clear, I guess I will still maybe vote against this, not that I'm disagreeing totally with you folks, but I think we have an opportunity to change it later too, so that's just my thoughts.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and vote. Yeah, all those in favor of the motion to eliminate line 40 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
The motion does not carry. Okay, now where are we at?
We're having fun now, split votes. All righty. We're going to go back to item number 2. All right. So the two pieces you're approving with item number 2 are the regrade of the treatment court coordinator, that's standalone. And then you're approving the reclassification of the assistant finance director, since you just eliminated her job, to the finance director, which is the position that you just created. So really, the approval is for those two, and if you want to specify the motion directly to those two components, that's fine. Everything else was being accomplished in the budget amendment. I really just put the detail in here.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would move to approve the regrade of the treatment coordinator and the reclassification to finance director.
I will go ahead and second that. Thank you, Supervisor Ard. Okay, any further discussion on those two items? The treatment court, I'm reading that right.
Yep.
I want to make sure coordinator regrade and the finance, addition of the finance director reclassification. Am I saying that correctly? Okay, discussion. Any comments, discussion on this, on the motion? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote on that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now where are we at?
Now we are at request for future agenda items.
Oh, okay. We're
I
done
do
with
want to
that?
thank you guys for going through. It was rather a complex
Yes.
process I had there, so I appreciate the time that you guys took to review those.
Okay, request for future agenda items. All right, any announcements and correspondence? And okay. I thought you were getting ready to say something.
Well, I was going to mention the strategic planning that's coming up in April. I'm going to mention it tomorrow night, too, at the county board, but really that's probably the big thing. So April 6th county board meeting will be the kickoff session for our strategic planning.
Okay, I guess it's now 10:48. I'll adjourn the meeting, and the date of our next meeting will be our regularly scheduled meeting on Tuesday, March 16th, I believe, at 5 o'clock. Thank you again for your flexibility. Thank you, Supervisor Ard.